With us today is Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, Chief of Staff of the Army, General Randy George. Welcome to you both, and a happy belated anniversary to the U.S. Army. Secretary Driscoll, I'm glad you were able to visit Fort Knox yesterday. Did you look at the gold?
I did. It's there as far as I can tell.
It's not worth what it used to be, I'm told.
So the current estimate is
Anyway, I'm glad you were there yesterday. I'm sure you found far more important than the gold we were just discussing, the fine soldiers and civilians who serve there. We appreciate that both of you are willing to serve our nation at a consequential moment for the Army, the Department of Defense, and our national security. And we're deeply grateful to the soldiers you lead for their bravery and their sacrifice at the tip of the spear. The recent losses of Army personnel in training incidents in Lithuania, Hungary, and Iraq are reminders of the risk U.S. service members take every single day to keep us safe. Matching the Army's structure and capabilities to tomorrow's challenges while preserving its ability to fight today is essential work. The Army's history reminds us that we don't always get to choose the types of war we fight and must prepare for all contingencies. Congress has backed the Army through a litany of failed modernization programs like Future Combat Systems or Crusader. We've watched new requirements, cost overruns, and adversary advances undermine their rationale before they became operational. If the administration made the case for sustained increases in defense spending, the Army would have a stronger hand when asking Congress to take risks on new initiatives. But net cuts to defense spending make it harder to balance the Army's current and future requirements. In the face of growing threats, pursuing generational change on the cheap is risky business. As you work with the Congress on the Army Transformation Initiative, I hope you'll look to the Marine Corps' own controversial modernization program as a model of transparency and building trust. Congress has a constitutional obligation to provide for the common defense and to steward taxpayer dollars responsibly. And we don't serve either the taxpayer or the common defense with blank checks for vaguely defined priorities. We want to see the analysis behind the specific bets the Army wants to place on ATI. We want to understand the second-order effects on industry, other services, and allies. Certainly, the Army needs to be better equipped to face Indo-Pacific contingencies, and we'll wait to understand how ATI intends to achieve that objective. Tomorrow's Army will need to integrate existing systems and modernized capabilities, sustain existing industrial relationships, and welcome new entrants to the defense enterprise. This is not a zero-sum game, and if it's time to walk away from certain legacy programs, the Army will need to show its work. For example, if it's time to move on from the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, why did the Army sign an $8 billion contract 2 years ago to procure more of them? Why did the Army not coordinate its termination decision for a joint program with the Marine Corps and other services to gauge whether such a decision would put the budget's operational capabilities or readiness at risk? And what is the impact on the defense industrial base the Army relies on? The services have to think through the industrial implications of such decisions. This isn't an argument to buy vehicles the Army doesn't need, but a recommendation to consider how existing manufacturing capacity can be put to better use in light of changing requirements. The Army's abrupt decision to terminate the Robotic Combat Vehicle program also reinforces a tendency to abandon promising capabilities midstream. This signals unreliability to industry partners willing to invest their own capital in future military technologies. In this case, precisely the kind of innovative tech company the Army claims it wants to foster. Of course, when we understand the Army's challenges and objectives, we can help you achieve them. For example, we combed through the unexecutable resources in Fiscal 25 request and found resources to fully fund the Army's #1 unfunded priority for counter-drone capabilities. While such an important requirement was unfunded in the first place, however, raises more fundamental questions about the Army and Department's own budget process. We also provided additional flexibility in funding to address UAS and counter-UAS challenges, and we invested in solid rocket motor production in excess of the previous administration's official request to help advance much-needed replenishment of the air defense interceptors and long-range fire. If the Army shares our concern about a paucity of air defense and counter-UAS capabilities, I hope you can explain why there is so little funding to provide systems like CWIS. This spring, Secretary Hegseth identified modernizing and sustaining the organic industrial base as an urgent priority. When we hear that the Army is considering mothballing purpose-built munitions production facilities already at your disposal, it raises questions about your intent to meet this directive. Army depots in states like Kentucky, Arkansas, and Alabama have already built trust with local communities, assembled skilled workforces, and they continue to attract interest in new public-private partnerships. That would be a win-win for modernization. So I fail to see how cutting this essential existing capacity will help the Army reach the production levels needed to meet growing demands. I regret that the Army is being tasked with doing more with less, but it's increasingly likely that looming challenges will test us in multiple theaters simultaneously. That we don't have the magazine depth for today's fights, much less the capabilities we need for tomorrow's. Certainly, we can't expect to keep pace with the pacing threat in the Indo-Pacific or adversary alignment across the globe if our base defense budget can't even keep pace with inflation. This subcommittee hopes to be an active partner in the Army's modernization efforts, but we can't expect success on a shoestring budget. So, Mr. Secretary, General George, I look forward to hearing your views on these topics. Turn to you momentarily for opening comments, but first, Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well, Secretary Driscoll and General George. Thank you for your service and for your testimony before us today. And I'd also like to first start by wishing the Army a happy belated birthday. The Army was there at Lexington and Concord, at Gettysburg and Antietam, at Normandy and at Okinawa, at Fallujah and Kandahar, and across the centuries and across dozens of fields of combat at home and around the world. The American soldier has fought and died for our freedoms, upheld the Constitution, and served the people of our great nation. My father, my brother, my sister-in-law, my uncles all served honorably in the United States Army, and I just want to offer my sincere thanks to all the men and women serving in uniform around the world, to their families, and to our veterans. I'd also just like to recognize that as conflict ramps up in the Middle East, there are tens of thousands of U.S. service members on the ground in the region, potentially in harm's way. And I hope and trust that the Army is doing everything it can to provide for their safety, and that every policymaker considers the risk that they are under in the decisions we are making. Today's hearing is to evaluate the Army's fiscal 2026 budget request. General George, we have discussed the need for the Army to adapt to today's threats, to innovate, and to field different capabilities, more so today than it has at any previous time in my lifetime. And I'm keenly interested in what the Army is learning from the war in Ukraine, how it plans to rapidly acquire and field UAS, and in some ways more urgently counter-UAS technologies at scale, and whether it's investing in the munitions magazine depth our nation and allies need in this new era. Ukraine's recent bold strike into Russia as part of Operation Spiderweb, as well as Israel's bold strike against Iran's nuclear program, both illustrate how resourceful planning, low-cost drone weapons, and innovative strategies can destroy billions worth of military equipment. And we know that the wide and increasing use of these systems and platforms, coupled with dramatic advances in electronic warfare, require new tactics and new concepts. We have given you in the last year flexibility in order to address this. I largely agree with most of what the chairman has said, so I will skip a lot of my opening statement also about innovation in the private sector and the industrial base. But in my discussions with you and other senior military leaders, I've consistently emphasized the need for procurement and deployment to speed up in this era of innovation. The Army's Transformation Initiative is meant to offer a solution to these challenges, and it may. But this subcommittee does not yet have sufficient fulsome information from the Army in order to adequately make that assessment. My other core concern with the Army's budget is readiness. When the FY26 request, when you take out inflation and the pay raise, it's essentially flat from 24. You've taken deep cuts in your O&M accounts to pay for DHS tasks on the southwest border and in our cities, as well as overseas operations, typically funded in a supplemental. DOD claims the president's budget request pays you back, but I'm not convinced you will ever see this funding. As I said to Secretary Hegseth in his hearing before this subcommittee last week, budget reconciliation is an uncertain path, a partisan effort, and the president did our military no favors by not planning for key capabilities in the base budget. Even if successful, it seems just as likely DOD will keep raiding your O&M account to pay for other priorities until Congress steps in and says, enough. Every member of this committee has a role to play here, a constitutionally mandated one. Finally, I feel compelled to offer an observation about the nature of our military and its relationship with our citizenry, and a plea for all of us to be thoughtful leaders in a contentious moment. For 250 years, our military has fought not for any particular party or policy or president, but for the Constitution and the freedoms enshrined in it. I've traveled the world on behalf of my state and the Senate, and I can definitely attest our military is the cutting-edge, most lethal, world-class military and the global role model for an apolitical military under civilian control. I'm worried that that legacy is under threat today from something more critical than funding or interagency reimbursement or readiness ratings. And that threat cuts to the core of the role our military plays in our nation, and it centers on the fragile but critical trust between a people and its leaders. I worry about crossing a critical line by asking our military to serve as de facto law enforcement either on the border or in major cities, and about the trajectory of our values when the Commander-in-Chief can goad soldiers into booing either the press corps or his predecessor, as happened last week in North Carolina. And frankly, too often, both parties contribute to a divisive environment that is seen as just politics. We need to reflect, each of us, on how we've contributed to this moment. 250 years doesn't happen by accident, and it's up to all of us to ensure the fragile flowers of democracy, rule of law, and an apolitical military are protected and allowed to flourish throughout the rest of our lives. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Senator Coons. We'd ask each of you to give an opening statement, now, starting with you, Ms. Secretary.
Chairman McConnell, Ranking Member Coons, distinguished members of this committee, it is a privilege to address you today. I want to start by expressing my sincere gratitude for your unwavering support for our soldiers and their families. And I'd like to start off with some good news. Our story is alive and thriving. We just celebrated 250 years as an Army, and it was a great success. Our leaders are the best in the world. I was at Fort Knox yesterday where I saw how we are forging warrior leaders from the cadet summer training to the command assessment program. And we are just getting started. We met this year's recruiting goals 4 months early, and we are on track to fill 20,000 fiscal year 26 delayed entry program contracts. Our recruiters, soldiers, and families are inspiring fellow Americans to step up during a time of global uncertainty and complex threats. They are the very best our nation has to offer, so they deserve the best support in return. That's why when I went through my confirmation hearings, I pledged to be the Soldier's Secretary of the Army. That commitment has guided our approach every single step of the way. And that's why General George and I believe the Army Transformation Initiative is the absolute best way that we can support our soldiers. Your partnership is critical to implement this reform, which is more urgent now than ever before. Ukraine and Israel are demonstrating every day how readily available technology can disrupt established power dynamics. They are demonstrating what happens when you embrace change. They are demonstrating why our Army needs to transform now and that we can't waste even a single minute. In my first 3 months as Secretary, General George and I have been immersed in understanding why the Army has been slow to innovate. Our soldiers are not the problem. We met them in the Middle East, Europe, along our southern border, and at installations across the United States. Their strength, dedication, and unwavering commitment to this nation are inspiring. We ask a great deal of them, and they consistently deliver. Nor is the ingenuity of American industry at fault. Our tech sector continues to thrive, driven by innovation, entrepreneurship, and a willingness to embrace risk. So where does the problem lie? As Secretary, I have found that the Army has become calcified, having suffered from years of inefficiencies, slow-moving processes, and wasteful spending. Program lobbyists and bureaucrats have overtaken the Army's ability to prioritize soldiers and warfighting. We must all work together to ensure the Army is ready to fight and win. The Army Transformation Initiative will make us into an Army that is lean, agile, and relentlessly focused on empowering its soldiers. We need to get rid of what we don't need, acquire what we do, and chisel our organization down to a lean, lethal fighting machine. And so we will forge closer, more effective, and innovative partnerships with the private sector. We will take a more venture capital approach, taking calculated bets that will pay off big. We will increase our Army's risk tolerance so that our people experiment, innovate, and use failure to propel us forward. And we will be fast, getting soldiers the things they need quickly and then iterate to make it better over the long term. To achieve this vision, we need to take decisive action right now. To achieve this vision, we must implement Army transformation. And most importantly, to achieve this vision, we need your support. We are asking this committee to empower us to make these changes while providing your constitutionally mandated oversight. We are asking for the flexibility to make decisions that keep pace with the rapid evolution of technology and warfare. We are asking for this committee to work with us to maximize the value of every dollar appropriated to best support our soldiers. We look forward to sharing additional budget details when they are available. Our budget priorities are our transformation priorities. We want to deliver critical warfighting capabilities, optimize our force structure, and eliminate waste and obsolete programs. Our budget places soldiers first, enabling them to win and making sure they have a high quality of life. It is my duty, both as Secretary of the Army and as an American citizen, to make sure that every single dollar is best used when it's received by the Army. And we can all agree that prioritizing soldiers, lethality, and readiness is money well spent. I know we are all committed to our soldiers, to their success, and to providing them with the overwhelming advantage that they deserve. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Chairwoman Collins, Chairman McConnell, Ranking Member Coons, distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. I would like to start off by saying that I'm extremely proud of our Army. I'm proud of our troops out in the Indo-Pacific, on the southern border, in the Middle East, in Europe, and of everything our Army has done over the past year to respond to wildfires, floods, and even a bridge collapse. We have formations all around the world conducting missions and exercises and innovating with our partners and allies. When not deployed, our units are conducting tough, realistic training at their home stations and our combat training centers. Our Army is a professional team that remains focused on its warfighting mission and young Americans want to be a part of it. This is evidenced by our strong recruiting numbers this year, and as you know, we've already met our recruiting mission for the year, and we still have our most productive months still ahead of us this summer. And while I'm proud of our Army, I also know we have work to do. We know the world is changing. Commercial technology is rapidly evolving, especially AI and autonomous systems, and this is impacting the character of war. We understand that we must transform to stay ahead of our adversaries, and we need to get better by 2026 and 2027, not by 2030. Over the last year, using existing FY24 funding, some of our units transformed in contact, which means they experimented with changing how we train, fight, man, and equip while they were deployed or in training environments. This was a great proof of concept. It confirmed that our formations are capable of rapidly improving their lethality. One transformation in contact brigade in Europe was 300% more effective in lethal targeting in training. Transformation in contact taught us some valuable lessons about what our Army should be buying and how we should be buying it. And we are just getting started. We're going to make changes that we can at our level so that we can continue to dominate the modern battlefield. For instance, we will cancel programs that are obsolete or not what our warfighters need. Developed and adapt war-winning capabilities and buy modular, open system architecture designs that can be iteratively updated. Cut and consolidate headquarters. For instance, we are going to reduce GO structure, cut positions from our headquarters department of the Army staff, and add in modern business systems that will make us more effective. And finally, we will power down authorities and funding so that commanders in our fighting formations have what they need to make their teams and their communities more successful. What I've learned from being in this seat is it is our job as leaders to do what we can with the budget that we have. I've been talking about the need for agile funding for UAS, counter-UAS, and EW. We need more flexibility in those areas. Technology is changing too rapidly. We've got to be able to buy capabilities rather than specific programs so that we can always get our warfighters the best available tech and equipment for the fight. This is where we could use Congress's help. As you saw this past weekend, we celebrated our Army's birthday. It was an honor to recognize American soldiers who have defended this great nation for the past 250 years. And our soldiers are ready today to defend the country. We will do our part to ensure that they have what they need to be successful in that enduring mission. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to your questions.
Hexas rightly identified the need to sustain and modernize organic industrial base. I was frustrated by the previous administration's slow pace in addressing obvious production shortfalls for critical munitions. So the department's renewed focus on this challenge certainly welcome. This subcommittee has taken this issue seriously for some time and worked to prioritize modern production capabilities and encourage public-private partnerships at Army depots. So despite the identified need to expand and modernize production capacity within the Army's organic industrial base, I'm confused by reports that the Army is considering mothballing depots like Bluegrass, Pine Bluff, Anniston, and Red River. It strikes me as counterintuitive. So, Mr. Secretary and General, does the Army intend to shut down these facilities? If so, how is this consistent with the stated objective of sustaining and modernizing them? And if that remains the objective, what steps does the Army propose to best take advantage of the Army's organic industrial base?
Chairman, I agree with you on the organic industrial base. I know we both agree with you on moving that forward. One of the decisions that we made, obviously, was at some of these places, do we continue to invest in doing things at these locations that we know we don't need? For example, areas where we know we are well beyond the max or we're producing things maybe that we don't need for the modern battlefield. So That's what we are coming back to. I mean, I don't think anybody, we know we need to improve in this area. One of the areas that we have talked about as an example is being able to produce drones and being able to do that at scale and produce drone parts. I think you mentioned some of what we need to do as far as improving on our munitions and working that. So I know we need to work with the committee to come back and talk to you about those things.
And I would just echo that the magazine depth that our Army has is low, and we acknowledge that the organic industrial base has got to be a component in maintaining that stability going forward. I think when we've looked at these couple of depots in particular, what we believe today is what we are making there now does not justify the cost. What we are not saying is that those depots don't have a role in the future, but the current things being manufactured there are duplicative and expensive. And so what we've directed the team to do is help us create a plan to actually take advantage of the resources that we have and be good custodians of the American taxpayers' dollars.
All right, Mr. Secretary General, what lessons has the Army learned and applied from Ukraine and Israel about the future of warfare? How do these lessons inform the Army's modernization efforts and your preparations for an Indo-Pacific contingency?
I can kick off and then hand it to my battle buddy. So I think that one of the first things we have learned is we have got to have a data layer that allows our soldiers to communicate across space and time. That data layer has to be synced with our things, like all of our equipment, and then our sensors, and it all has to be sharing information in near real time, because without that very basic data layer, anything like applying in generative AI and all of the things we could do for targeting, offensive and defensively, cannot occur. And so the fastest thing we are trying to move on is getting a data layer so that we can layer in a lot of these kind of digital advancements that are happening in Ukraine. And Chief, you want to take the last bit?
Chairman, I could probably go on for this for quite some time, so I will just, and what we look at when we look at lessons learned, we talk about observed, because until we actually change what we're doing, we haven't learned them until we've actually changed our organization, change how we're operating, and that's what we're trying to do with transforming in contact. I think a big one is you can be seen anywhere on this planet, nowadays, and so signature is very important. So what we are doing to reduce our signature of our unit, it gets back to what the Secretary was talking about as far as what our command and control systems are, what kind of emissions we're putting out, how are we reducing the visible signature for those things. That's one big area, and that changes go across all of the warfighting functions. Just because of logistics, things like that are easy to, you're easy to spot. And so how we reduce our logistical tail, headquarters sizes, all of those things are going to be incredibly important. I think the biggest thing that we are trying to get after, and that's why we've asked about with Agile funding, is to be able, we know that with drones, countering drones and EW, it is moving very rapidly, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. And, in those areas, I think producing anything that is a program or record probably is not going to, maintain the pace of what we need to do. So we need to build modular open system architecture in all of these systems and then be able to adapt them. And that's what we're working to do in all three of those areas. But we are definitely paying attention to those. We have updates on those, I would say weekly, and we send those around to the Army. We are updating our combat training centers to make sure that we understand what it's like to fight in those environments the best we can, that we can produce stateside. And we are actually trying to also change at every one of our installations, the rules and regulations to make sure that we can fly drones and do the things that we need to do. We have to train in these environments too before we get ready to, deploy anywhere for our nation.
Which leads me to finally ask, talking about training environment, what if the U.S. decided to cut off assistance and information sharing with Ukraine? Are you concerned that that would lose valuable insight into their operational experiences? And what message would that send to our allies in the Indo-Pacific?
We are getting a lot of valuable information and trying to glean those lessons. I think that was your point, Chairman, that we are getting from them, with what we're doing with
My question was,
training.
what if that stopped?
I mean, I think that obviously getting that information is very valuable to us in what we're doing. I mean, we collect, I think we do a lot of things to collect and share lessons with our partners around the world. That is something that we have been doing and pretty consistent about. So, I mean, that all of that is helpful to build our formations.
Anything to add, Mr. Secretary?
I second what General George said. Ukraine has been described as the Silicon Valley of warfare. The biggest lessons that are occurring in this transition and this inflection point, that how humans have conflict is changing right now in a way that it hasn't changed in a very long time. And the front line of that definitionally is Ukraine. And we are learning a lot as the United States Army from what's occurring there.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could, just a brief opening question for both of you. For the record, do you oppose a full-year continuing resolution for the Army in FY26? Mr. Secretary?
I think the Army will operate under whatever constraints we are given.
Does it disadvantage the Army to have to operate under a full-year CR? General, does it disadvantage the Army to have to operate
Yes,
under a
I
full-year CR?
think we'd want a budget.
Thank you. I think so do all of us, but it's just helpful to have clarity on that. And I agree with the point just raised in the last question by the chairman that our partnership with Ukraine is absolutely critical. And I'll tell you from my last bipartisan trip, CODEL, with Senator Ricketts to Taiwan and the Philippines, our treaty ally and our partner are watching very closely whether our support for Ukraine is sustained in the face of aggression by Russia, and they will draw conclusions from whether or not we are a steadfast and reliable partner. Let me turn to my two core questions. I've had the tragic honor of attending many dignified transfers at Dover Air Force Base. General, I've seen you there as well. And I recall clearly 18 months ago, the transfer of the remains of the 3 Army reservists who were killed at Tower 22 in Jordan. They were killed by a very low-cost, low-tech, but lethal Iranian drone. We did not at that time have the counter-UAS systems to detect it, intercept it, and stop it. I went back to the region and met with a series of military leaders and was very concerned by what I heard about the lack of currently available, deployed, effective counter-UAS systems. And as I mentioned, given developments in the region, this is a heightened concern. General George, what does the fiscal year 26 budget request show that's going to address this dynamic and concisely help me understand how you're achieving through agile funding, the need, as you said, to buy capabilities rather than specific programs of record in this area where the technology is rapidly emerging. We have a great partner, the Silicon Valley of warfare right now. How does this budget request accelerate your capacity to deploy and defend our troops?
I think you're going to see, sir, that we're going to spend a lot more money specifically on counter-UAS. I would also tell you that spending the money on the drones helps as well, because there are cases where we have, I think a lot of what we're learning too is that drone on drone is a good, way to do counter-UAS. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both. And that's a big part of what we want to do with the transformation initiative, is make sure that we're spending, focused on those areas. I think everybody's going to have to deal with this across the joint force moving forward. Everyone is going to have to deal with countering drones. We are doing a lot with making sure that we are, not sending stuff to, White Sands or doing it other places. We're still using those areas, but also just sending things directly to the Middle East is, for an example, what we're doing with transforming a contact. We have a very large exercise that's going on right now. We'd love to come over and brief you at the when we get finished with it, called Flytrap, where we're doing this over in Europe, actually putting all the different sensors, making sure that we're lashed up as far as the data layer that the Secretary was talking about, and then kinetic and non-kinetic effectors. We have to get after the cost curve, and I think that that's what we're looking at. And there's many, and I could go down the list of directed energy, laser, kinetic, drone on drone, testing all of those EW systems that we are doing. And
Thank you.
we need to scale it, I think is your point.
We do. Look, as I said in my opening comments and have communicated to both of you, I agree the Army must change and modernize how it fights and must take into account significant changes in technology. But bluntly, months after you've announced the Army Transformation Initiative, this committee hasn't received detailed or substantive analysis as to why the Army is planning to cancel or reduce 12 programs of record, consolidate or reduce staffing at 21 commands, or how the investments you're proposing will significantly enhance battlefield lethality. I am eager to work with you in good faith, just as this committee did with the Marine Corps, but we need your analysis to make informed decisions. Mr. Secretary, when will the Army be able to brief the Army Transformation Initiative in detail to this subcommittee so we can do our job?
Senator, we'd be happy to come by anytime, but I think very specifically you will have that detail within 10 days.
That would be welcome. Did you coordinate critical ATI decisions with other services before you announced the cancellation of joint programs?
Looking at ATI, and when we do the math, it's basically $48 billion in spending over 5 years that we don't think is relevant to the Army anymore. And the reason we don't is you talk to soldiers, there are instances where like the Army hadn't requested a Humvee in years, and yet we kept it getting
I hear
every
you. My
year.
question was about consultation with other forces, other services.
I'm giving you a long-winded answer, Senator, to basically say the reason that change was so hard is because when that consultation occurs, what would happen is the antibodies in the system come up to stop change. And so when we weighted the decision of how do we actually get the most likely chance of succeeding, we decided that the best chance was to sync with the Pentagon leadership and the administration and keep it very narrow until after announcement. But we consulted with them the night before we announced it and then very soon after it came out live.
You're well aware of examples like the Marine Corps being very surprised about the JLTV cancellation and there needing to be significant adjustments following that.
Absolutely, Senator. And we weighted the risks and the benefits and decided it was, we believed better to do it.
Can I just make one comment on that,
Please do.
Senator? Only because, we always, across the joint staff and across the services, we're going to fight as a joint force. And we're looking at this, and, the Army warfighting concept is part of the joint warfighting concept. So I will tell you that everything that we did, that we took in mind, was about how our Army is going to operate within the joint force and looking around. So again, in my view, what we're not doing is impacting anything. I think we're going to be much more lethal to provide for the joint force. There might be one example of a system, but overall, we are going to be much better prepared for the future.
I'm over time. A quick last question, General. Has the Army been directed by the Secretary of Defense to withdraw any Army echelon from Europe?
Not that I'm aware of.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for going over time.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Driscoll, General George, welcome. We're glad to have you here today. The Army, I have always had a special appreciation for because my father was a World War II combat veteran who was wounded twice in the Battle of the Bulge. Recently, with some of my colleagues, I had the opportunity to attend the 80th commemoration of that historic battle. It was very moving. The Army's 250th birthday parade was also a cause for commemoration and celebration. And during that parade, there was the public unveiling of the Ripsaw robotic combat vehicle. This vehicle is built in Waterboro, Maine, by a very small, innovative, brilliant firm. The kind of company that we need more of in our industrial base so that we are not so dependent on just some prime contractors and a few smaller firms that are in the supply chain. It's more than a few, I realize, but we need more firms that are actually producing what the Army needs. It's very interesting to read a report on the Ripsaw vehicle. It is described by this reporter as signaling a clear step forward in the U.S. Army's path toward next-generation warfare dominated by robotic and unmanned systems. It goes on to say this vehicle is not only the product of innovation, but also a testament to mature program execution, combining robust industrial support with real-world deployment readiness. It is ideal for modern battlefields where surprise, speed, and stealth define success. So they go on to say that it marked a tangible shift in the Army's commitment to embracing unmanned ground combat capacities as a core component of future warfare. I've reviewed the classified assessments of robotic engagements, and I understand the threat landscape posed by drones and autonomous platforms. Yet the Army remains behind in fielding robotic and autonomous systems. And this is why we were so excited when the robotic combat vehicle was selected, when it won a down select over large primes, over other companies, because it is the one funded program that shows real promise, and it could have served as a foundation for future innovation, and it's ready to go today. Mr. Secretary, how does walking away from years of development specifically designed to integrate with other Army platforms put the Army on a credible path to innovation? And when exactly will our soldiers deploy with robotic systems that not only enhance lethality and support counter-UAS operations, but protect what we value most, our soldiers' lives?
Senator, I believe, and I was writing the note to make sure, I think that How and How was acquired by Textron. And so before I make this comment, I want to disclaim. So we met with that leadership team to talk about this. And just from a high level, any business so far, or the vast majority that have reached out to us when a decision has caused them harm, we are trying to help them bridge to what the Army needs. And so I just very publicly want to state the defense industrial base is weak. We need to grow it, and we are trying to be thoughtful in this. Then specifically to your question, the robotic combat vehicle that was demonstrated in the parade is an incredible piece of engineering capability. The fundamental problem is what General George was referencing, the cost curve. So an $800 drone with a very cheap munition can take out a $3 million piece of equipment endlessly. And what we, the United States Army, have done very poorly in the last 30 or 40 years is we keep building exquisite pieces of equipment that we cannot, even as one of the wealthiest nations in the history of the world, sustain at scale. And so, unfortunately, what happened with the RCV is it is the classic case of the Army doing a very bad job to ourselves. We came out with too many requirements. It took too long. By the time it was built, it was too expensive. When we contrast that with the things that are working, as long as the vehicle or the tool or the asset can be driven by wire, there are a lot of software companies now that can basically take, like we had one take an existing Humvee, we had it take our infantry squad vehicle, and in 10 days they can make it autonomous. And that's the type of cost curve we can afford, is to go out and find things that are already being purchased by consumers and translate them over to military cases. And so for the vast majority of the things we need to purchase today to counterbalance all of the exquisite things we've purchased in the past, we have got to be buying cheap, attributable, scalable solutions. And unfortunately for the RCV, it's just not one of them.
Well, two comments back to you on that. One, it's the height of irony that you would feature this combat vehicle in your parade as the future of the Army at the same time that you've canceled the contract. the cancellation of a contract that was won over a lot of other competitors. Second, this is equipped with anti-drone technology. And third, drones are a threat to all sorts of vehicles. This one is autonomous. You're not going to lose a soldier's life if it's taken out. I think you should review this decision. I think it was terribly unfair and a real mistake. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary and General George. Thank you for being here. It was a little over 75 years ago when President Harry Truman made the decision that the United States would be the first nation in the world to recognize the creation of Israel. It was a moment of great pride and one that has led to an alliance which endures to this day. And I want to ask you a question or two about that alliance. Currently, Israel is engaged in conflict in Gaza with Hamas, but more recently in Iran. And my question is, what is the role of the United States as this war unfolds between Israel and Iran? The reason I think the question is relevant is that there's been some inquiry of the White House of what the president has meant by recent statements when he's referred to we in reference to Israel's role there. For example, the fact that the statement was made that the skies are safe now, we accomplished that and such, leads to the obvious question, what is to be our future involvement in the Israeli-Iran conflict? Can you tell us, Mr. Secretary or General George, has there been any efforts made or changes made in terms of positioning troops, equipment, or other resources in anticipation of an invasion of Iran?
I can just tell you, Senator, for what we're doing for the Army, what our job is to make sure that we have forces that are forward for General Kurilla and the CENTCOM team, make sure that we're doing our part to protect. It's kind of a little bit to the earlier question about counter-UAS, integrated air and missile defense. And so we have sent forces forward to make sure that we are postured around the region to, defend our interest over there.
And has that decision been made recently?
I think we've had a lot of that has been over there. And again, we have provided some additional capability over to the region to make sure that, again, we are providing, we have the defense, we can defend our interest over there, our troops that are over there.
Is it a matter of weeks or months since the decision was made to upgrade our position?
I think, Senator, we are constantly evaluating our position when we're, over in different locations. I mean, we have moved stuff around. Again, what our job is in the Army to make sure that we have, trained and ready forces to make sure that we're providing them, forward, for placement. There are, I'm sure that, what CENTCOM will do is move the different assets that we have over there and take, just like I did when I was in a combat, situation where I would move and adjust what I had for structure that was over there. And I'm sure that's happening as well.
Could you give me some indication, Mr. Secretary or General, as to the number of troops we're talking about in this upgraded situation?
Go ahead. I don't have
We can follow back up with your office, Senator. As a general matter, we generally do not talk about troop movements and where we are placing soldiers, but we're happy to, especially in a classified environment, show you everything you want to see.
And are we referring to the Middle Eastern theater in terms of the position of these resources?
I think we have resources around the world. We certainly have resources in the CENTCOM in the Middle East area of responsibility.
And just very, broadly, we are hyper-focused on providing our soldiers around the world safety. And with the events of the last couple of weeks or week, we are talking about it actively.
Let me ask a quick question to follow up. The chairman asked about depots and their future. I, of course, have an interest in an arsenal, and I'd just like to make a plea that the men and women of the Rock Island Arsenal have responded when asked over and over again. When it came to up-armoring Humvees in the early stages of the war in Iraq, they were there even before the private sector could respond. And I hope as you move forward, you will turn to their expertise and give them an opportunity to bid into some of this work to save us money and to continue to make us the strongest defense in the world. I hope you can.
And Senator, I think we're going to be going to Rock Island together soon. I haven't gotten a chance to visit it. General George and everyone I've heard has said it's an amazing place, and so I look forward to seeing it with you.
That's a great idea. Thanks a lot.
Senator Graham, followed by Senator Baldwin, and then Senator Moran.
Thank you both. Good morning. Thank you both. The FY25 Army budget was $185.9 billion. Ms. Secretary, that's a lot of money, right?
It is.
Yeah, well, I think we need more, and I think most of us up here understand that. Budgets need to be based on threats. So let's walk through the threat matrix real quick to America and see if we need more spending on the military list. Putin. Is there any indication, General, that Putin's going to stop his effort to dismember Ukraine anytime soon?
Well, it's hard for me to predict anything, but I would say,
Well, let's
right now,
go.
what we're
Last
seeing-
night was the biggest attack on Kyiv, and they killed an American citizen. So as of last night, he doesn't seem to be willing to stop, does he?
Yes, you're right, Senator.
Yeah, I hadn't
Agree.
seen any intel. I mean, does anybody up here think that he's slowing down? I don't. So we spent a lot of our ordnance and military equipment to help Ukraine, right, Ms. Secretary?
We did.
And the reason we're doing that, so that we don't get in a war with Putin. You know, if he gets to a NATO country, we're in a war with Russia, right? We're trying to stop him now.
I believe that was the theory of the case.
Yeah, well, that's the good theory of the case. So if Putin's not slowing down, seems to me we're going to be needing to help Ukraine more and be sending a deterrent message to Putin. Let's go to Iran as a threat matrix. How would you rate Iran's threat to the United States, General George?
I would rate the threat as more, there's a couple regional, I think is the biggest to our interests that are out in the Middle East with the troop concentrations that we have there, other interests and
Well,
partners and allies.
Do you know what November the 4th is in Iran? Do you know? It's Death to America Day. In 1987, Iran made November the 4th Death to America Day. That's a hint what they think about us. Do you believe, Ms. Secretary, that President Trump is right to say no nukes for Iran?
I totally support the president.
Do you believe Iran would use a nuke if they had it against Israel and maybe us?
It's hard to answer a hypothetical.
Why is
scenario.
it hard to answer? They say it. They write death to Israel, death to America on the missile. That's not hard. They have 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium at 60%. What commercial purpose is there for highly enriched uranium at 60%? I'll answer it for you, 0. They got enough highly enriched uranium at 60% to make a bunch of bombs. Why do they have one of their enrichment programs at the bottom of a mountain? Do you know?
I would hypothesize for security.
Yeah, I would hypothesize that they want to enrich and make sure they're safe in doing it. So let's stop playing this game that Iran is like an uncertain enemy. They say it, they mean it, they're going to do it if somebody doesn't stop them. Do you agree that we're in the land of force now, General George, when it comes to stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions?
Can you repeat that question again? We're in
Do
the
you
what?
believe that it seems to be that the only option available to us now to stop their nuclear ambitions is force?
I don't know. I know that they're still reaching
watch
out to make
television?
sure. I do. I
Okay,
do
well,
watch.
I mean, Seems to
news.
me diplomacy for 60 days. One, Mr. President, thank you for reaching out to Iran. Thank you for reaching out to Russia. Thank you for trying to find a peaceful solution. But it seems to me that we're full-on engaged, at least Israel, to take down their nuclear program before us. Is that a fair statement, that Israel's made a decision to take their nuclear program down by force?
I think that's obvious.
Yeah, I think so too. And do you agree with President Trump's decision that a nuclear-armed Iran is a threat to us?
Again, I think the president's been clear that he doesn't want Iran to
No,
have
I mean, do
nuclear
you agree with
weapons.
that? Do you think it's a threat to us?
That we don't want Iran to have
Yeah.
nuclear weapons? Yes, I agree
Yeah,
with that.
I don't think we do. I don't think we do for a lot of reasons. China, do you think China will take our Taiwan by force if America and the West seems weak in the eyes of China?
I think deterrence is incredibly important in making sure that
Do you
we
think
have
we
that
may have
ability.
lost deterrence after our withdrawal from Afghanistan, Mr. Secretary?
I think that the withdrawal absolutely
Yeah,
harmed
I
our
think
global
we have, we need to regain it. Do you think ISIS and Al-Qaeda is still out there trying to find ways to kill us here at home, General George?
I do think that
Okay, so
they're
the
still a
threat matrix is about as large as I can remember. So to those who wondering, should we spend more in the military? We should. And the goal is to spend money in the military to prevent war, but if you get in one, to win it. So last question. The Ayatollah said today that if we help Israel destroy their nuclear program, and he's not going to give it up, he said that today, there'd be all-out war with America. Did you hear that today?
Yes, I did. read
Okay.
that.
So are you confident that America has the ability, nobody wants a war, but if we got in an all-out war with Iran, we would win?
I think we're confident for 250 years the United States Army
Yeah,
has
I do
achieved
too.
every
My
goal we've
money's
been
on the
given.
Army, my money's on the military. I don't want a war, but if you pick a fight with us, you're gonna lose. To our friends in Israel, keep it up, we got your back. Taking that program down is an existential threat to Israel and to us. This is a moment of choosing for the world. I hope everybody understands that if they get a nuclear weapon, they're religious fanatics, they're religious Nazis, they would use it. I don't believe that about Rocket Man, I don't believe it about Putin, I don't believe it about China, but I believe it about these folks. And this is a moment of choosing, and we better get this right. And if you get it right, normalization's back on the table, China's less likely to go into Taiwan, and Putin we'll have a new conversation with him. If we get it wrong, the world's gonna blow up even worse than it is today. God bless you, God bless the Army.
Senator Baldwin's called. Next, Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about readiness. Secretary Driscoll and General George, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. I want to make sure that you know about my priority of expanding healthcare options for Reserve and Guard members. The National Guard is seeing a tremendous uptick in mobilization rates, and improved access to health insurance would help support soldiers' medical readiness. I worked with the previous chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Hokanson, on developing a bill called the Health Care for Our Troops Act that would provide premium-free health insurance to all members of the reserve components. Will both of you commit to working with me on identifying ways to improve TRICARE access for Guard members and Reserve members?
I would be honored to work with your office on that.
Certainly we'll work with you, Senator.
Thank you. Now, I think both of you would agree with me that in addition to soldier readiness, the readiness of the industrial base is essential to our national security. I want to thank you both for calling me back in April to share a broad outline of your plans for the Army Transformation Initiative. Secretary Driscoll, I am interested in hearing further details from you, as you've heard from my colleagues, about how this initiative and the subsequent cancellation of certain vehicle programs will impact our defense industrial base. Both the Humvee and JLTV platforms have an extensive networks of small businesses that supply components that ultimately land in these vehicles. So, Mr. Secretary, in your assessment, how will the supply base respond to the cancellations of these programs, and how do you plan to preserve supplier capacity?
Very sincerely, Senator. General George and I are incredibly optimistic that Army Transformation Initiative will be a renaissance for small and medium-sized businesses, not just on the coast and in Silicon Valley and the tech companies, but throughout the heartlands. And if you can make something that the Army needs, and we need a lot in this inflection point in warfare, we are gapped in a lot of spaces. If you can make things that we need, what we are trying to do is close the loop on being able to purchase those things more quickly so that these small and medium businesses, and the large ones too, that make investments can get rewarded for those investments. I think the way that we are viewing these cuts for the Humvee and the JLTV that you referenced is we have to do it for our soldiers. I mean, we just are over-indexed on these types of vehicles that just do not provide the mobility and the empower our soldiers to be lethal in all of the environments we need to be. They're too heavy, they're too slow, and we have too many of them. For the downstream effects on the industrial base, we talk about it often. We have probably spoken to, I would guess, 20 CEOs at this point, trying to empower them to get their employees and their developers and their manufacturers out into the field with our soldiers so they can see what is working and what is not working and take that back to their shop floors to build us the things that we need. And so what you are referencing, I think, is probably one of the challenges of our lifetime. We're short on munitions. We're short on our anti-drone capabilities. We're short on a lot of things. What we're not short on is American pride, patriotism, and innovation. And what we are desperately trying to do as quickly as possible is empower those great Americans.
So in Wisconsin, we probably have 40 or more suppliers to the two canceled programs, and I very much worry about their health. But I do have another question that I want to slip in here. The Army's Transformation Initiative emphasizes the rapid fielding of warfighting upgrades and moving away from traditionally slow government-developed programs of record. In the case of tactical wheeled vehicles, I believe that platform recapitalization efforts can help achieve these goals in a cost-effective way while still meeting the Army's mobility and lethality mission requirements. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to know if you've assessed the Army's planned Common Tactical Truck program against your stated goals. Additionally, have you evaluated whether a more straightforward recapitalization of the family of heavy tactical wheeled vehicles would be a better way to accelerate technology enhancements to troops, save money, and avoid creating a new program with new maintenance challenges? Have you made that evaluation?
We're actively in the process, Senator. For those larger, heavier vehicles, one of the things that is so exciting about what is occurring in software development, we worked with a company called Applied Intuition, and basically this was what I was referencing earlier to your colleagues. As long as the vehicle is drive-by-wire, we can do all sorts of things to upgrade existing vehicles that the Army already has, and we want to be good stewards of the assets that we've been given. And so we are looking across all of our platforms to figure out what can we upgrade that we already have in the cheapest way possible to help provide soldiers additional capabilities and safety and lethality. And so, but as we continue to go through this process, we'd be happy to come to your office and talk to you about it.
Senator Moran, then Senator Kennedy, Senator Bozeman, Senator Capito.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Secretary, General, in my view, my view of the Army Transformation Initiative is undetermined. I don't think we know enough as to whether we can say we agree with you. The things you've outlined today and in the past are certainly things that matter. Getting us in a supply chain circumstance in which we can meet today's needs using today's technologies. One of the things that troubles me is that we don't yet know how you are going to spend the money that we've been talking among my colleagues, at least this morning, been talking about things that apparently may not be funded, but we don't yet know how you're going to fund. And maybe that's solved in the next 10 days in response to, your response suggests so, that that's the case. But it's hard for me to say we're on the right path because I don't know what path we're on. I hear what we're going to do to reduce. I don't yet know what we're going to do to spend. So I would tell you that a thing that I think is a fallacy that the plan seems to be based on. And I can presume I can be convinced to be wrong once I have more information. But the concept behind the plan seemed to be that we're going to be focused on China. And I'm all for focusing on China. They are our pacing challenge. But it seems to be that the belief is that we can do so while focusing significantly less, almost not at all, on the rest of the world. And I don't think we can have a plan that's based upon a particular theater when the Army has to be, our Defense Department has to be focused on the globe. And the conversations we've had this morning, Senator Graham outlining the challenges we face. I don't know that he said China, maybe he did, but he certainly talked about the Middle East and he talked about Ukraine. And I want to make sure that as the Army transitions to something, it doesn't make the decision that we're only focused on China. I happen to believe that focusing on the Middle East, focusing on Europe, focusing on NATO, focusing on Ukraine has a consequence in China or to China, to the South Pacific. And so as the Army develops its transformation program, as it explains it to us, I need reassurance that we're not solely focused or not only is perhaps too strong of a word because you can tell me we're not that, but that we've not forgotten that the rest of the world matters to the United States of America, and we want the rest of the world to know that. Mr. Secretary?
Senator, and I'll hand it to my Ranger buddy in a second, but we oftentimes, General George and I talk about in a lot of settings, any human being that believes that they have been able to predict the future current events since the dawn of man has oftentimes and probably most times been wrong. What we hope you see in 10 days as we explain our changes and the recycling of this $48 billion, this was not intended to be simply a cost-cutting exercise. Every dollar is intended to help us innovate and move forward to face threats around the world. What we believe Army transformation does is, in our Title X authorities to man, train, and equip the United States Army, we want that Army to be able to fight in any theater, anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. And so what we believe it does is it starts to pull us from where we are over-indexed on these slower, more exquisite systems that just cannot achieve that goal in a lot of locations around the world, and pull us to this more digitally enabled software manifesting in the world as these new hardware systems surrounded by drones and autonomy and all of these things. Like, what we believe is that solution set is binarily required for combat anywhere, not just in the Indo-PACOM.
Before going to Secretary George, I want to ask a couple other questions before my time expires. I don't believe that ATI is fully accounted for in the Army's budget, certainly not what we've seen to date. And I just would highlight, if it's not, how can you expect us, if it's not or will not be, how can you expect it to provide us a budget that this committee can support? And if it does, everything that I see appears to be a flat request for funding and not a growth. And I don't think we can transform the Army without additional resources. And more importantly, I don't think our country is safe without additional resources. I want to highlight, and I visited briefly with both of you, Secretary Driscoll, I was with you at Huntsville. We talked about FLORA and its advancing production so that there's not a gap of several years between prototyping and in production. And General George, I talked to you about this in Kansas, and it seems to me that you're on the path of trying to accomplish that goal, but I can't find any place in which money is designated to fund production during that gap, neither in the reconciliation language or in the budget details that the few details that we've seen to date. Can you assure me that someplace in that budget or in that request are those dollars?
You should see in the budget when you get the details soon.
Okay. And I want to thank you, Secretary, for your efforts in my consistent effort to try to get people hired, the Army Corps of Engineers at an Army Corps of Engineer lake in Kansas. I thank you for your attention to this detail, and I look forward to some good news at which the Army Corps of Engineers has actually hired someone now that you have lifted the hiring freeze. So thank you. And in that regard, I'm planning to introduce legislation that would expand the use of IGSAs, local and state governments, to conduct business for construction and engineering with entities, private entities that are outside the Army Corps of Engineers. This bill would expand the kind of funds which can be used in inter-support agreements, enable the Army to utilize construction options aside from the Army Corps of Engineers, saving time and money. And when this legislation is introduced, I'd like for you to see it and hopefully have your support. We've seen this in few instances in the country in which we can save money and time by dealing with a local entity rather than the Army Corps of Engineers to engineer these projects. Mr. Secretary?
We'd love to look at that and work with your office on it.
Thank you, sir. General?
I wanted to go back to your point on, what we're doing for transformation. What we had in mind from the beginning, and I mentioned the Army warfighting concept, is that we would actually look at how, I think what we're talking about, being more mobile, lower signature, increasing the number of drones, counter UAS, EW, all the things that we're seeing on the modern battlefield are going to work everywhere around the globe, and that's really what we're focused on. Same with other kind of systems, and we're also trying to bring, just like you mentioned, the MV-75, and bring some of these other systems, bring them forward, because we know that they're going to increase our lethality on the battlefield, and that's really where we're focused.
My encouragement would be that the Army needs to talk about its global responsibilities, not just its concern in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to land this plane within my time. I want to tell you briefly how I see the world and invite you to tell me if I'm wrong. I think President Xi and President Putin and the Ayatollah in Iran are working together. I think that President Xi is the quarterback. I think their goal is to have Russia dominate Central and Eastern Europe, to have Iran dominate the Middle East, and to have China dominate the Indo-Pacific while being free to roam in sub-Saharan Africa and South America and space. I do not want America to be the world's policeman, but I don't want President Xi or President Putin or Iran to be the world's policeman either. Do I see the world in the right way?
I would tell you, Senator, that we are seeing them. I don't know specifically what their ambitions are, but we do see them working together and doing some of those things against our interest.
General, I need you to, both of you fine gentlemen, to look us in the eye and tell us what you think. I understand you got to choose your words carefully. You don't want to get put on double secret probation. But we've got some hard decisions to make here. And there's a consensus, I think, in the Congress to give you more money. Because I think we need to spend more money on defense. But you're going to have to give us straight answers and tell us what you think. Mr. Secretary, am I right or wrong?
Senator, your question of, one of your colleagues said it earlier, $185 billion is a lot of money. If we are given more money than is in the budget that you've seen, we will be good stewards of that and innovate even faster. I think what we are saying to this committee is we believe we can transform the Army with those amount of dollars as long as we are able to use them the way that we want to, and we are not
Tell
jammed.
me again the amount of money you need for the Army transformation.
We can use our current budget and transform the Army, as long as we're able to spend it the way that we believe is right.
How much money do you think we need to spend as a country to maintain or either, depending on your perspective, reach parity with China?
I think the president has mentioned between the two bills, $1 trillion for the DOD.
Okay. Do you trust Europe to spend more money?
I'm sorry, Europe, Senator.
Do you trust Germany to spend more money? They've talked a good game.
When I was out with NATO with Ambassador Whitaker and talked to a lot of our colleagues in the NATO countries, and as far as I could tell qualitatively, they believed it seemed to be that they were going to start to spend significantly more.
General, do you trust the United Kingdom to follow through and spend more money?
I mean, all I've gotten, Senator, is what they said that they were going to do with their new defense review, that they said that they were going to raise, their spending on defense.
Based
So
on your
it remains to be
experience,
seen.
do you believe them?
I mean, I think we're big believers in the, we'll see. I think action is what counts in some of this. There's certainly been a whole bunch of our allies that have done that when they've called for.
Tell me,
Poland
General, how you think the war in Ukraine relates to our struggle with China. Are the two inextricably linked, or do the two have nothing to do with each other?
Well, I think, Senator, everybody is watching that fight right now, taking lessons from it. I think everybody's doing that. I think everybody is looking. I get a lot of comments.
General, I know everybody's watching. I got that
Yeah.
part. We're all watching. Do you think what we do in Ukraine impacts our struggle with China or not? Give me a straight
I
answer.
do think our partners and allies are watching what we're doing and how that turns out. Yes, Senator, I agree with that.
All right. Last question, because I'm going to land this plane. How's our recruiting coming?
We're dominating recruiting and retention.
Why is it better?
We made some structural changes and the return to a focus on lethality among our leadership.
What structural changes did you make?
We created a future soldiers prep program that gets soldiers or future soldiers who are right on the edge and helps get them a little bit more training before they join. And then there were problems with when we transitioned over to digital medical records. We were catching things when kids were younger, and we didn't have in place the mechanisms to get those waivers, and we have improved there dramatically.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bozeman, Capito, Murkowski, and Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Sunday, I saw the clip on television about the Army Museum's new thing regarding the Revolution. And so we went out on Sunday afternoon. It's excellent, and congratulations. It is really wonderful. And I was telling a group yesterday in Milcon that it's not just about the Army. It's just about the soldiers that started, the country, and then that same spirit has lived on till now. But it really is remarkable. Like I say, congratulations. I hope everybody goes and sees it. I've really enjoyed visiting with you all about the ATI. I share your concerns, again, with modernization. I also share Senator McConnell's concerns and Senator Collins and others here. In fact, many in Congress about what he stated with the loss of the organic industrial base. Current events have made one thing clear: the commercial industrial base alone cannot meet our munitions demands. That's why in Congress, many have advocated for investing in Army-owned organic industrial base facilities. Secretary Driscoll, will you commit to continuing to work with the committee, continue to work with myself about modernizing critical munitions productions at these plants?
Unequivocally, Senator, it is. There are probably a couple of threats that if we don't figure out how to get scalable solutions together, we are going to put our Army in a bad position, and that is absolutely one of them, and it would be an honor to work with you.
Very good. Thank you. Also, Mr. Secretary, I know the continuing resolution has come up. Could you and General George, can you give us examples, if we have a continuing resolution, how that affects the mission, the commitments we have? I know in the past, people have talked about training and things.
Yeah, obviously, part of the problem for us is we would go back, we wouldn't be able to make some of the changes because it would be based on previous years. So that would obviously be, detriment to us in the Army. But I think it's new starts. It's how things, change. We know the battlefield is constantly changing. I think it would impact in several areas.
And just, Senator, predictable funding is a virtuous kind of concept that helps us in a lot of different ways, from training to have. We oftentimes talk about how we, the United States Army, are a bad customer, both to ourselves and to our the companies that sell to us. And one of their biggest complaints is how we are funded, and that is a lot of this is baked into how our form of government was set up, and that's okay. But when it is when we continue to have CRs, it makes our spending decisions and the downstream effect on our suppliers even more amplified.
Right. Another thing I've enjoyed talking to you about, General George, is the Army's efforts to refine its drone capabilities. Certainly with what we saw happen to the Russians. Can you talk a little bit about how the Army would integrate and field mass small drone technology?
Senator, I think that, back to your organic industrial base, that's a perfect example of an area where I think we need to, produce. We're producing very few drones here stateside. I mean, even companies like Walmart using them,
Right.
in
Most of them are
parts
Chinese made.
that I think that we need to, have here in our organic industrial base. And there's a lot of things that we can do, that we are doing, as far as 3D printing and innovating at the edge, but that's certainly one area where there's an intersection where I think we need to improve on, and we're working with you all to do that.
Thank you. We appreciate your all service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the ranking member, and thank you both for being here. It's good to see both of you again. Since we've been talking about the industrial base, we know that the rates of firing munition expenditures we're seeing are quite high. As you know, West Virginia is the home to Allegheny Ballistics Laboratory, where we're making, by the end of '26, we should be able to deliver 10,000 Gimler rocket motors. This site currently has, this is a different question than what Senator Bozeman said, because this is a private entity that has manufactured there for years. Is the Army utilizing, maximizing using existing munitions capacity nationwide, such as what's at ABL, before investing in new sites to try to get the munition production to where it needs to be? So, General, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I would say both, Senator. I mean, I think what we're trying to do, and this is one of the things that we talk a lot about that we want to improve, is our magazine depth, and I think it's going to take a little bit of both. We're obviously looking on, what we would do inside the industrial base, how we would help very specific things that could that go into producing these missiles. So that is a big focus of ours, where we want to spend money on. I will tell you that, as far as I'm aware of, we are going to capacity. So we are funding the capacity where we can do these kinds of things that you're talking about, like Gimlers and these other things that we know that we need. And we would certainly welcome more capacity on that.
Right. Mr. Secretary, do you have a comment on that?
I would just echo everything he's saying. I think we as a nation need to focus on this. We need to do it organically and inorganically with outside partners, and we should be investing in both because redundancy in this space matters. Contested logistics, we haven't faced them as a nation at scale, especially in our own home in CONUS, in a very long time. And there are benefits to having us manage that as a nation through government-owned manufacturing facilities, but those will almost always definitionally be slowed down by bureaucracy, be more expensive, and they are helpful, but they should be balanced out by private partners who can just innovate a lot faster.
Can I give you just a quick example?
Yes, please.
Senator, 155, which I think there was just something out, we're up to $1 million a month. That is a combination, or $1 million rounds a year. That's a combination of what we're doing in our organic industrial base, what we're doing with private industry to help. So I think that, again, to do that, we're going to have to get both of those moving.
Yeah, well, I would suggest what the Secretary is saying in terms of speed and deliverables, private sector, by saying it's slower on the government-owned side, there's still capacity in the private sector. I would just encourage you to keep looking at that. I'm going to change it up a little bit, because Secretary Driscoll, when we met, we were on our way to Asheville with the incoming vice president to see the response to the flood. We just had a flood in West Virginia that just this morning, 8 lives now have been lost in that flood. the Army National Guard is absolutely critical in the response to these kinds of disasters that we all have in our states. In your budget, you have cut the Army National Guard below 2025 levels. And I would be interested to know, how does the Department of the Army anticipate that the National Guard will meet the challenges of concurrent homeland defense missions, large-scale combat operations, and then other things that the Guard's asked to do? I think the answer that you have, maybe previous answer, is that with 90 days' notice, they would be able to prepare for mobilization, and that's why they're getting less money. But how do you respond to that question, General George?
Yeah, I'll just, one of the things we've talked about in part of Army transformation is to make sure that the National Guard is transforming with us. This isn't like hey, we're doing this on the active side. I think it's both. As far as I'm aware, the Guard is actually is continuing to grow. They have had a great recruiting year, and I know it depends on, region to region on what we're doing. But actually their end strength is going up. So we are looking at making changes, for example, to make sure that they have mobile brigade combat teams so they get the same equipment that we get, that they get drones. You mentioned Asheville. That was infantry squad vehicles that were down there with drones that were helping people with the right C2 systems, and I think we need to do that. It's going to make them much more responsive around the globe, and it's also going to make them much more responsive in West Virginia, which is why we want to and do this quickly.
Good.
And Senator,
Yes.
I would just echo, General George and I, in every meeting we have had, said we want to treat the Guard exactly how we treat the active duty component. They are an incredible asset for the American people. They dual hat or triple hat in some instances. Not only can they help with state issues or deploy when we as a nation need them, they also come with this incredible set of talent and experiences because they oftentimes have day jobs. And so if you thought of where warfare is going, a diversity of experience, computer programming, all of these different things, you may have an infantry soldier who is also good at that, and that is unlocking a ton of value for the Army as a whole.
Well, good. I mean, I can't say, in visiting, and I'm sure all of us, the theaters in Afghanistan and Iraq when they were going on, we all met our own Guard units there, deploying multiple times throughout those engagements. I did want to ask a question for the record on the Pathfinder program, where at the level of the force, they're able to develop and try out different munitions, different ways about going things. So you got a bottom-up kind of structure where your actually warfighter is the one who's helping you make the decision about what. Do you have a quick comment on the Pathfinder?
Yeah, we love that kind of bottom-up information, Senator. And I've interacted with these, with these teams that are out there. That's the whole idea of transforming in contact. That's what's helped us actually shape how we're transforming the Army. We started this, we're learning the lessons, we're making adjustments, and we're getting those are the kinds of things that we need to be investing in, I think, as we move forward.
Well, I'm hoping when we get the report in the next 10 days or so that we see that budgetarily it's directed in that direction as well. Thank you. Thank you both.
Murkowski and then Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for being here, for your service. Secretary Driscoll, thank you for coming to Alaska recently. I want to talk to you about some of the Arctic initiatives. Super proud of our 11th Airborne. But before I do, I want to talk about the people who are executing this extraordinary mission. We talk a lot about the lethality and what it is that we do, whether it is the assets, the equipment, or the training that goes into it. But so many of these folks, everybody has family back home, right? Maybe it's a mom and dad, maybe it's your wife and a couple kiddos. I have been concerned with some information that just came to my attention, like within the past week, with regards to the Family Advocacy Program. This is responsible for the prevention, the identification, and coordinated response to whether it's child abuse, neglect, domestic or intimate partner violence. These are things that we don't want to acknowledge go on within our military because we want to think that everybody's just okay and everybody's holding together, but our military are just reflections of what happens in the general society out there. And so there are problems, there are issues, and we need to be there for those families. I learned that Fort Wainwright has lost all of its family advocates. So they don't have anybody there at Fort Wainwright. We've dealt with some challenges, as you know, in Fort Wainwright in some recent years with suicides. We want to think that we're getting a handle on some of these, but these kinds of supports are so critically important because it's not only those within our military, but they're working closely with other partners in the community. The community itself doesn't have the resources to help stand this up. So I know that what we've heard is some have accepted the voluntary early retirement or the separation buyout, but I'm worried that with the current hiring freeze, we may have some really critical positions that are not in the news until something bad happens. So I would just ask for your commitment, Secretary Driscoll, that you can look at support for family advocacy programs, make sure that we're not leaving our military families without this support, and maybe even exempt the program positions from the hiring freeze if you're seeing that that's part of the challenge. Can you speak to that?
So, Senator, we will follow up with your office on this. Just to qualitatively just say, what General George and I are not trying to do in anything is, when we say show our math for these cuts, we also mean show the math or acknowledge the warts and the issues that our soldiers have. For the Army's 250th birthday this past weekend, General George hosted us, and I had probably 18 guys who I had deployed with came in for it. I hadn't seen a bunch of them in 15, 16, 17 years, and it was amazing hearing their stories, but also their tragedies that service has cost, and we need to acknowledge that. And so very sincerely between the two of us, we want to work with the Army's leadership who also cares to fix these things. And then just to the waiver authority, for the United States Army, I get a weekly report of waiver requests. As far as I know, we have always approved waivers for this type of position. And so we will look, but we will double down on our commitment to make sure we're not accidentally blocking anybody from being hired.
I appreciate that greatly.
Can I just add one
Yes,
thing, Senator?
General.
We use Alaska as a perfect example, very tight-knit group. People that are up there love it up there, but it has different needs. And so that's the other thing that we're trying to do is look at areas very specifically, what they need up there in Alaska. So I just throw that on because, we put a lot of energy in making sure it's a different environment in mostly positive ways, but making sure that we're also reinforcing it that way as well.
Well, thank you for that, General. And you've kind of teed into my next question, which is a focus on the Arctic. As I mentioned, the 11th Airborne designated as an Arctic division. General McConville had said, he says, I expect every soldier of the division to be masters of their craft or Arctic warfare. What we continue to hear back is that we haven't clearly defined what Arctic capable really means and whether or not they are properly resourced or equipped for Arctic warfare. And we can cite to some of the equipment, the cold weather all-terrain vehicles. We don't know that we've got enough Black Hawks to move them, but some of it is just basic outfitting with cold temperature and Arctic protection systems. So I don't know if within the budget in front of us, you can point out to me how the Army's only Arctic division has what they need in order to be successful in this very specific mission, specific to a region, as you have pointed out, General George.
Yeah, so Senator, we are like cold weather gear is a perfect example, and having been up there in February when it's 40 below, there's obviously special equipment. So I think we are buying Cat Vs. The discussion we're having up there, and that's why we're trying to actually make headquarters adjustments up here. I do think that there's some areas we need to give different capability down to 11th Airborne, at the warfighting level as far as on the targeting or intel, and that's one of the things that we are looking at with the changes that we're making now to reduce what we have going on here at this headquarters. But I think we do have an Arctic strategy. I think we're committed.
Are you going to have a new one
to
coming out?
do that. We'll obviously review it. I don't
Okay.
think we don't have any plans right now to. I think it's pretty solid in what they're doing. We have been increasing our training at the readiness center that's up there. So we'll continue to do that. And then we're looking at what we would do for whatever kind of additional equipment. Those soldiers are also, they're very tough, hard. They do well deploying anywhere in the world. You know, what additional equipment do we need to have for them if they're going to go fulfill other missions, which we need them to be able to do? To the earlier questions, we don't predict where bad things happen.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here, and to all of you for your incredible service here today. Appreciate you so much. Mr. Secretary, I was governor before I came to the Senate, and any governor will tell you, and probably has, that the Guard, National Guard, is a Swiss Army knife. I mean, for all things military, when you need them, when we need them, but whether it's supporting law enforcement, whether it's any kind of flood, fire, you name it. When I was governor, we had them out on the ice, blowing up ice jams to protect Bismarck, the capital, from flooding. By the same token, we had them with huge 640-gallon dump buckets and Black Hawk helicopters saving small towns that would have burned out in the grasslands if they hadn't been there. They're first on scene for hurricanes, where hurricanes came through and just devastated communities and saving people's lives and property. They are true, and they bring such a skill set. Truly, they are a Swiss Army knife. And I want to make sure that as the Army goes through your transformative initiatives, that the Guard is brought along and has true parity in terms of all the training and all the weapon systems, as well as access to education and advancement and everything else, that the, you know, I should say, and the reserves too, that the regular Army has. And I'd like to know if you're committed to that and your thoughts on it.
We are absolutely committed, and just to echo and add like another layer of nuance to what the Guard does so well for us, is General George and I were able to go talk to a lot of the victims of the Pasadena fires, and then the Mountains, North Carolina flooding is where I'm from, and so I've gotten to talk to a lot of people there. And one of their most concrete experiences with the United States Army, so if you just talk to a lot of Americans, the way that the Army kind of reaches out and cares for them and loves them and shows them kind of that American spirit is through their Guard members who show up on their worst day. And so General George and I, when we talk about the Guard, we explicitly and very publicly say we want to treat them just like we are treating the regular Army in these transformation initiatives, and we want to empower them to continue to be the amazing asset that they are.
Yeah,
Can I add a couple of comments to that one,
Please,
Senator? You might,
please, General.
I had, met with almost all of the tags before we made, brought them in, told them the changes we were going to make. There will be several of the brigade combat teams, so we're moving from infantry brigade combat team to mobile brigade combat teams. We want to do that as fast as we can in the Guard. As well. And so they are identifying those units that will be able to do that. Obviously, it's a little harder when you're not full-time, they're doing, as you mentioned, they're very busy. So they won't look any different. They will have mobile brigade combat teams. They're going to have the same systems. And when we talk about this, it's for the whole Army. So I just want to assure you that that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, we've had Guard units in our state that have deployed almost every other year for the last 20 years in the War on Terror, and Guard members that have served probably 5 or more deployments. I go to these ceremonies, and I think there are some of them as many as 6 deployments. So, I mean, they're integral to everything we do, and obviously need to be right there and have, complete parity with big Army. The other thing I want to bring up is drones. In North Dakota, we actually have 2 Air Force bases. One is the only dual nuclear base in the country where we have B-52 bombers and also the ICBMs. And so we watched with, frankly, amazement when Ukraine took out bombers across Russia with these drones. And we've got a very real problem in this country, a vulnerability on our base. You've seen the stuff on Langley with the drones going over there. But it's really something we've got to address across country, both drone in terms, and I know you've been asked this question about, bringing drones into unmanned aircraft into the Army in terms of an offensive capability. We've seen the importance of that, whether it's the Middle East or Ukraine, Russia, or whatever. But counter drone is a huge, huge issue, and we're not we're not prepared. Our bases are vulnerable. I'm talking about in CONUS now, more so probably even than overseas, because overseas we shoot them down. What are you doing to get on top? At Grand Forks, we do a lot of drone and counter drone, and we'd love to get you out there sometime. What are you doing on this? And what do you need on counter drone, protecting our bases?
I would agree with you, Senator. We have to move quickly on this. One of the things that we have submitted up, a lot of times we don't own the airspace around that. So this is an issue with FAA, FCC. So we have submitted, for like 130I, that hasn't been updated in a while. I think we need to do that. It gets back to how we buy things. I think we need to be a little bit more agile in the systems we're buying. A lot of the, how we're going to operate the non-kinetic solutions, we've been trying to rapidly evolve those. But I agree with you that we need to go quicker, put solutions out there, and start working together. I mean, it's not just our problem too. It's going to be a problem for police, fire, everybody really with large gatherings. I think drones are now inside of our communities, and we're going to have to focus on this.
Well, if there's legislation that would help you, I'd sure like to get it from you.
And I would just echo, Senator, in all of our meetings, we've tried to stress this. This is the threat of our lifetime. What General George was saying, this will impact local law enforcement. It will impact our border, CONUS, OCONUS, our bases around the world. We have got to all work together to fix this right now, because Operation Spider's Web, I mean, the cost to Ukraine was tens of thousands of dollars, and the damage done was $8 to $10 billion, and that, we need to be ready.
And finally, I'd just like to thank you for the incredible job that our administration and our military is doing in terms of supporting Israel and taking out an existential threat that is the nuclear program that Iran has. Thank you for the incredible job that you're doing. You can't overstate how incredibly important it is. Thank you.
Similarly, for years, we've watched the use of long-range fires and drones, as we were just discussing, in both the Middle East conflict and in Ukraine, certainly gotten our attention as to why in the world we haven't been able to produce them more rapidly, because we've had several years here of observation about how much that's going to be involved in warfare in the future and in the present. Why do you think we don't have enough?
I'll kick off. I'd say drones and our inability to manufacture them as a nation are why we believe the Army Transformation Initiative is so important. And I think what we would say is this system has been hollowed out for a long time. We have had a hard time as a nation figuring out how to spend these incredible resources that are the American taxpayers' dollars efficiently and effectively. We have basically crushed our defense industrial base and gotten it down to sub-10 number of companies that can even afford to do business with us at scale. And since the threat level has changed so rapidly, all of those bad habits that we've developed in the last couple of decades are now coming home to roost, and we all have to work together, as we are hopefully doing now, to basically fix this threat and empower small and medium businesses to innovate and scale with the United States Army, knowing that one solution will not fit all in this, and actually a diversity of solutions is what the right solution will be in the future, and that a program of record is the exact opposite way to do it. But it's hard because the muscle memory that we've developed in that Pentagon is, we have some hard conversations every day.
I would add, Senator, I mean, it's parts. I think we came up with this earlier, those blue lists. So, DJI produces, I think I've mentioned this to your team, they produce 15 million drones, 50,000 get produced here. Everybody is using drones. So I think this gets back to some of the industrial based thing. I think we have to get after some of these parts, brushless motors, flight controllers, wiring harness, antennas. There's different things that I think that we, and that's what we're looking to do. And it does get back to the agile funding. Then we can produce a lot of those 3D print and do those other things, but we can't get locked into where we're buying one specific drone, forever, which is what we've tried to do with our, transforming in contact units, is that we buy in tranches, modular open system architecture, and then we can adapt and update them. And we're working that with your team.
Well, I hope so, because obviously they were pretty cheap. You get a lot of bang for the buck. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for this constructive hearing. In reading through your written testimony, I was interested in the infantry squad vehicle and the description of its modularity and ease of being updated, and particularly was drawn to AMC developing containerized additive manufacturing shops that can be forward deployed, that can help with parts and maintenance. I've just been really struck at how the Ukrainians have managed to keep in the fight and to service and to repair and redeploy dozens of different systems. I mean, Europe is not efficient. There's a dozen different tanks, a dozen different armored personnel carriers, and they've managed to MacGyver their way into standing up to a much bigger adversary. We obviously have been a critical part of that. We've talked a lot about drones, counter drones, EW, but there's also critical lessons here. I'm encouraged that you're learning them. I look forward to working with the chairman to make sure that the ATI actually is fully briefed and that we give meaningful and timely input back. But we've got a lot to get after here if we're going to actually deliver the fighting force that our nation needs and deserves. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I want to thank both of you for being here. Thanks for your service and your testimony. Members of the subcommittee will have a week to submit additional questions for the record, and senators may submit additional written questions, and we ask that you respond to them within 30 days of receiving them. Subcommittee now stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.